Now just before I put the foreground in, I have noticed that now that it's dried, that the reflections of the dark shadows under the arch of the bridge are quite a lot paler than the shadows themselves. It's not a problem really, because I can now go in with a bit more of that mixture of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna and a little touch of rose madder, and I'm just going to put that in again to emphasise the rich dark in those shadows. Working with the number 8 brush so that I'm not too clumsy. And I'm just going to then clean the brush and with a bit of clean water on it, soften that in at that point. Indicating maybe a few ripples as well. Now at this point here where I'm reflecting that bit of green that you glimpse under the archway, we'll just put a bit more of that in. This is the Oriolin and Cobalt Blue, and just merge that in as well. And then we'll leave that to dry before we take the masking fluid off the foreground. Well, now let's get rid of that masking fluid from the foreground. I'll just rub that off with the tip of my finger, and you can see how that's quite different to masking fluid that's been put onto dry paper, because I've got a broken diffuse edge. I'm going to now paint into that, so I need more of the greens that I used earlier in the picture. I've got a number 8 brush, and I'm just going to dampen this area where I've had the masking fluid on first of all, help the paint to flow more easily. And we'll start with some lemon yellow and drop that in, all into this area where I've had the masking fluid. Nice contrast there with the bright lemon yellow and the dark reflections behind. Now a bit stronger green, I've got the Oriolin and Cobalt Blue there. I'm going to wet this area at the bottom of the bridge as well so that I get a soft effect there. And we'll get some more lemon yellow on this number 8 brush and drop some colour into there as well. Now I'm going to get a number 16 brush now to get a bit more ground covered with this foreground. More of the Oriolin and Cobalt Blue. I'm adding a hint of raw sienna to the Oriolin and Cobalt Blue to make it almost like a sort of olive green. I'm working that in. Important that I work all these colours in together so they just float in. I don't want anything complicated in the foreground. It's easy to overdo foregrounds and start painting too much detail, like every blade of grass and every reed and leaf. More important really to get a soft, loose feel to it. Still with that number 16 brush, I'm now getting some of the rich dark green so that we get a really nice dark strong tone in the very front of the picture. Helps to bring the foreground forward. Just working it in with the very tip of the brush. I've got a number 8 brush, get some lemon yellow on it. This is almost neat, this lemon yellow, and laying that in amongst the dark to give me some variety. Then some more Oriolin and Cobalt Blue. Quite a rich summer green now, just to keep that bit of looseness, that suggestion of all this foreground foliage rather than actually painting it with a great amount of detail. Let's get a bit of the dark on the tip of the brush and indicate a few plants in the very foreground there. And then with the detailer brush, I've dried that out and dipped it into the neat lemon yellow. We want now a few suggestions of grasses and reeds and leaves and things, breaking up that foreground area with just the reflections behind it. A bit more of that sort of work just to sort of bring the foreground forward by putting a bit of detail in. And then with the same brush, the same fine detailer brush, some of the dark green, just bringing out these suggestions. And because I've got quite rough paper, I can use this detailer brush on its side to create a bit of texture. You can do the same with the detailer brush and a touch of lemon yellow. See how important it is to choose rough paper for a painting like this. Okay, so we'll leave that to dry. So just to round the picture off now, I'm going to add a little bit more detail, a few more leaves, twigs, branches, that sort of thing, just to emphasise the natural growth all the way around the structure. So I've got the number 2 brush and some lemon yellow, and in front of this tree trunk there's a few leaves catching the light. And then with the same brush and some darker green, there's a few leaves at this left hand side that actually overlap the bridge. It's just about putting enough detail in but being careful not to overdo it. With something like this, it's important not to do dots with the brush, but little dashes, and it suggests the shapes of leaves without you painting them in with too much detail. I'm also just going to take a bit of the dark brown mixture, the burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, and still with the number 2 detailer brush, one or two little branches, almost sort of pointing the viewer into the main part of the scene. And then in the foreground there's also one or two little suggestions of branches and twigs. Ask yourself at this stage, keep stopping and ask yourself if you've done enough. It is easy to get carried away with detail and overdo it. But I think that completes the scene. So we can see from this a couple of quite important lessons. I think firstly, if you look at the structure of the bridge, it's been very important to suggest the rough stonework and the crevices between the stones, rather than paint everyone and put too much detail in, which in the end flattens and deadens the scene. The other thing to look at are the greens. I think we've really achieved some nice greens and a really good variety of greens from just a few colours, but there's a definite continuity from the greens behind the bridge to the ones growing up the bridge and the ones in the reflections and the very foreground itself. So the whole picture has a harmony.
Now available on DVD. Try these techniques yourself at home whenever you wish. Today's workshop is now available to order on DVD from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.